Thank you for coming, and it's a great pleasure interviewing you. We had yesterday a talk already, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think we just continue a little bit what we discussed yesterday. But to make a little to give it a little start, is Apigee, that's correct, eh?
Yeah.
That's the most difficult part of the day. It was bought by Google, like more than a year ago.
Yeah, about 15 months ago.
Why do you think the audience here of CIOs, bankers, etc., need to care of what's the impact of combining your expertise you guys built and the marriage of Google?
Yeah, super interesting question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for technology leaders, like we have in the room, it's not what people say, it's what they do, right? And it's no mystery that Google's competing with Microsoft and Amazon for cloud business, right? And so I think it's hugely informative when Google decides to make a fairly substantial investment in API infrastructure technology. It really tells the market, hey, this is an important component of kind of the next generation IT or cloud stack. And Diane Green and the whole team felt like it was important enough, even though Google does have API technology, it was important enough for them to acquire Apigee and bring them in-house, right? So as a technology leader, I would look at that and say, if Google's going to compete partially on the basis of APIs, then what is my technology stack? What's my API stack?
To get the elephant out of the room, people talk about, we always do this in interviews, also uncomfortable question, because people think it.
Oh man,
it's like, why should they do, I know banks do business with you, and a lot of companies do business with you, but people are a little hesitant initially to partner with a tech giant. And I don't think it's a problem but what do you think? You ever encountered that, or you thought about that?
Yeah, maybe once or twice. Yeah, so I think I have two answers for that question, right? So the first answer is when you actually look at Google's business, and I'm going to talk about this almost more as an outsider, right? Because even though I've been in Google for just a little over a year, we're mostly a separate operating type company. We are in Google Cloud, but we haven't really been integrated yet. I feel myself more as what we call an Apigee from Apigee than a Googler. But you look at Google's business, and even something where it touches financial services and banking, like Android Pay. Android Pay just facilitates credit card payments. Right? It's a facilitator of, a distributor of card payments. They don't actually compete with the banks, they actually facilitate that business, right? And so I don't necessarily see that tension, whereas if Google was operating something like PayPal, then I would totally understand, hey, look, there's a disintermediation that's happening there, and I can understand why you'd be wary of that. But it's actually a facilitator of the bank business, anybody who's a card issuer, right? The second answer that I would give to that is when you understand the corporate structure, there's Alphabet, there's Google Cloud, and Apigee inside of that. And those things are very separate, and there's really no way that Google could expect to be successful working with banks in general, or retailers or anybody else, if it was also competing with them.
The fact that you won so many customers, big customers, you might talk about it later, that shows that you convinced them that this independence exists, of not competing with your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually, just to add on to that, I'm actually leading a team that is looking at how we can take Google, you think of it, Google as a demand engine. We can take Google demand, Google properties, Google assets, and help drive Apigee's customers' business faster. So I'll give you one example, not to dwell on the point too much.
Go.
One of Apigee's customers is a company called MindBody. MindBody makes software that yoga studios and fitness studios and others use to manage their business. A big part of managing like a yoga studio or a CrossFit studio is scheduling. And so MindBody has taken and opened up APIs using the Apigee platform to scheduling. Well, who's a consumer? One of their consumers of those APIs. It's Google. So you can go on Google and do a search, either on Maps or just in the search bar. It says, CrossFit classes near me. And it will pull up a list of CrossFit classes near you. And because it's using those MindBody APIs, right, it can actually give you the schedules and enable you to book right there. So it drives business for the CrossFit studios and for MindBody.
That's a good entrance. I mean, how do you think the people here should look at the APIs? Because, I mean, the reality is the fintech industry, insurtech industry sees it as an opportunity, obviously, a huge opportunity. It's like nirvana. I mean, at least that's how we envision it. And the bankers, at this point, I don't say for everyone, but they're like deers in front of headlights and say, oh, the fuck, we have to open up this API. This has to be cut. We have to open up, but I see it more, not everyone here, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of smart people, but they have a different view. It's like we're opening up shop, but not really opening a shop.
Yeah.
So what would you tell them how they should look at API?
Yeah,
and the opportunities.
And it's interesting because in one of our workshops this morning, we were talking about PSD2 and APIs and that kind of thing. And we got about 3/4 of the way through the time, and I'm kind of thinking, hey, time out. All we've been doing is talking about the regulation. We haven't really been talking about the opportunity of APIs. And when I look at the rest of Apigee customer base, most all of those customers, I mean, whether it's mobile networks or retailers or media companies or whoever, they're competing with APIs, right? They're either trying to build a platform of their own, or they're trying to leverage other people's ecosystems by taking their APIs and, like in the MindBody example, and carrying them through to other ecosystems. And so, in our conversations with the banks, we really try to say, yeah, you have to do the compliance of PSD2, open banking, whatever, but screw that. How can we go to market and how can we compete better, with APIs and look at new business models and that kind of thing?
David, we all know, a lot of great innovations and ideas come from other industries, not even banking. Yeah. And then we try to apply it, and magic happens. Have you a good example of old world businesses that basically are not really, they are probably tech savvy now, but that they saw the light of API and the opportunities? Is there examples you might talk about?
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I had this a couple conversations to take over and over dinner last night. I certainly wouldn't necessarily look in your own industry for shining examples of API excellence, right? Because I think for myself, I've been at Apigee for over 10 years, right? It started when it was just a bunch of guys around a table like this, right? And so we've been working with companies and helping them adopt APIs and go to market and be successful with their API platforms. And I think if you look, especially in the retail industry, for one, and I can maybe just give you a couple of examples of old companies that have done this well, but they are much savvier with their API approaches and building ecosystems. So a couple super quick examples. Walgreens, that owns Boots, right? So pharmacy retailer. They have about 8,000 stores, and I forget how old they are. It's 126 years old or something like that. So not as old as some of the banks in the room, but old industry, right? They had a photo printing business that was clearly dying, right? You have digital cameras and you have phone cameras, and their photo printing business in their store was just, getting killed. They built a mobile app so that you could print your photos at a Walgreens, right? Total failure. And we got introduced to them and we said, hey, look, people who really want to print photos, who are still interested in that, they're probably using interesting photo apps. They're not using the Walgreens app. I mean, come on, guys. And so they opened an API.
Photoshop.
But they opened an API and they started thinking about it. And they also came up with a different business model, right? Because they had to ask themselves, hey, what's really important here? What's really important is not the photo printing revenue. They could care less. It's the foot traffic. When people come in to pick up their pictures, they know how to monetize people when they walk in the door, right? So they actually put a business model in place as well. They said, okay, here's our API for photo printing. And if you generate any photo printing in our stores, we'll share the revenue with you. We'll pay you. They've got like 80 or 100 photo printing apps, right? This whole ecosystem that they've built on this platform that drives foot traffic, right? And as soon as they started seeing that momentum, they said, what else can we put an API on, right? And so they put an API in their prescriptions API, which is like the core of their business. So now they can embed that in doctors' offices and WebMD and other places to drive more prescriptions. And so now they've got an entire platform with this whole ecosystem built around it. I'll give you one other example, because there was actually an article about this today or yesterday. Magazine Luiza is a retailer in Brazil. And they're fairly large. I think they're like the second or third largest retailer in Brazil. And they took a shift. They said, okay, we are basically a retailer with a digital presence. They have a website. They had a mobile app. And they said, hey, let's turn this around. Let's actually be a digital platform that has physical stores, right? And so they've been slowly opening up sets of APIs to do deliveries on their platform, right? To allow third-party sellers in. And you can see where this is going, right? Because they know Amazon's coming. And so they wanted to build out their own digital platform and get their own digital mojo going, right? Their stock last year was up 500%.
And the thing is, you mentioned platform.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where banks would love to be, to create a platform where people really come, not just to make money or to take a loan, but to have a place, a destination, It's like, fintech, like we call it fintech supermarket, but a supermarket of services. So APIs are probably the means for institutions or organizations to become a platform, a destination.
Yeah, for sure. But you kind of have to. You're talking about Olympic level sprinting, building a platform, right? And I think the way you start that is you got to start by crawling.
Yes.
Right. You have to get moving, and so building the capability of, hey, we're going to start building APIs. We're going to insist in all of our projects that APIs are built. We're going to start having a core competency of API excellence and industrializing APIs. That's how that starts.
I think most people here probably think, they see the value of APIs, but they see it more from internally.
Sure. Yeah.
But what's your experience? Do you think that banks, do you think banks are ready?
Oh, man.
Without insulting anyone, because then we're closing shop here. We have to give them a vision, how usually it's working together. I mean, you can't do it alone, and probably they can't do it as well alone. But
yeah, so I think a lot of banks are not ready, and it's not necessarily my opinion, right? You look at the deadline for CMA's open banking came and went. If those banks were all excellent at APIs, they probably would have figured out how to meet the date. The fact that they kind of struggled and some made it and some didn't kind of gives you your answer, without necessarily asking me. And that's part of what I meant by building the muscle of being able to build and release APIs and do that kind of thing, right? That's a far cry from building out a platform. But even just stepping back from that, when you think about building that muscle, you really have to ask yourself, because I think you make a big assumption that says, hey, everybody sees the value of APIs. And I actually don't necessarily think that's true. I think people say, oh yeah, APIs are important, whatever, but they don't really internalize it and do something about it, right? At the most basic level, APIs are just how one piece of software talks to another piece of software, right? And as a IT executive, you've got to say, hey, is software going to be more or less important in the future, right? Because we're talking about hitting big trends. And you could think and say, well, that's kind of a obvious question. Like, why are you asking such a basic question? But if it's such an obvious question, what's the program?
You know what the problem is? I mean, I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Is those other companies allowed other companies to use the APIs. And I mean, APIs are used anyway, but banks and financial institutions prefer their products to dock in those APIs. But the key is probably allowing others, which by law it will happen, sure, and to let innovation prosper that way. Because as we discussed yesterday, I think you said it or I said, it's like, they know it's a door out of the building. The only thing they have to do now is opening the door. Yeah. But they miss the opportunity to build something outside the door so people come in. To feel, hey, that's a place that's a destination. But the only thing is, oh, fuck, we opened the door. Let's see who's coming in. But instead of thinking, hey, we opened the door, yeah, more people will come in. And anyone who points to the direction to this building called bank is a good thing. But
yeah, so I mean, two thoughts on that, right? So
it's the wine that speaks.
Yeah, exactly. There's a old saying that banks have regulatory moat around them, right? Invokes images of a castle. Castles kind of ceased being effective in the mid-1600s. Why? Because of gunpowder, right? And these cannons were invented with gunpowder that really made the protection of the moat and the castle walls pretty meaningless. And I think there's a shift in business today where you look at a lot of these really effective businesses, right? It's not about having kind of walls and protection. It's about your connections and your reach and your distribution, which is a lot of what APIs represent. Because you look at modern web apps, and we're talking about these big fancy buzzwords, right? Digital transformation and that kind of thing, right? If you're building new digital experiences, they're going to be built on APIs, whether it's single-page web apps, whether it's your mobile apps, whether you want to be on Alexa or Google Assistant or that kind of thing, right? Or whether you want to show up in Money Supermarket or wherever, right? Most of that's going to be done via APIs. And so, I saw another piece of news today. It's actually US-centric news, but they were talking about the massive amount of bank branches that were being closed this last year. And I think it was something like 1,700 branches in the US were closed. So in a digital world, what is your bank branch? And I think a lot of people would think, well, it's my mobile app. But you think about a bank branch reaches people where they are, right? So you would open a bank branch in a city or in a neighborhood that you wanted to be, where you wanted to get those customers. And then you went even further, you kind of open a micro branch maybe in a grocery store because that's where your customers were, right? Or you would just even open an ATM in a pub because that's where your customer, right? The digital equivalent of the bank branch is the API because it takes whatever your products or services are and can inject them in other people's experiences and other people's ecosystems. And I'll give you an example of that. Western Union is a customer. Western Union can see, and it's kind of obvious, right? lots of people use Facebook. I want to be where my customers are. So they used a set of APIs to build a chatbot on Facebook so that you can do Western Union money transfers inside of Facebook, just like you would put a bank branch inside of a grocery store. That's the kind of distribution that APIs give you.
What do you think is a threat for banks who don't get the opportunity of APIs?
It's not going to be Google.
No, but I mean, not that, but what happens if you say, okay, let's wait until, other people figure out how to do it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's a good strategy?
Yeah, well, obviously not.
I'm glad we
you're great at throwing softballs. No, yeah.
No, but the thinking is, though, you have to understand that some people think they spend a lot, 70 to 80% on legacy. They don't spend as much money on new stuff.
Yeah.
And some people just think, maybe it's not a priority. I mean, whatever the law pushes you, but not beyond.
I think, yeah. Certainly, doing nothing or kind of a wait and see is, and obviously history will either prove me right or wrong, but I think that's probably the surest way to be disrupted. And that should have some kind of offensive strategy, offensive API strategy, right? Because if you just open up the APIs and then just sit back and kind of wait, then people are going to do what they're going to do, right? But if you have some kind of an offensive strategy that says, hey, I know what my core business is, I want to provision my balance sheet everywhere, and I'm going to find ways to do that, even if digitally it's through APIs, I think that's the right approach. And
why should they work with someone like you? Not, and not do it themselves, because initially it's probably cheaper, doesn't mean it's better. I see the value of working together with experts, but...
Yeah, well, it's like anything else, right? And I'm not going to give some big pitch on our technology. Do we have good technology? Yeah, we have good technology, but whatever. I think there's also expertise and there's execution, right? So, in the last 10 years, we've learned a lot from customers as we've seen customers, start API programs and fail. Customers, spin their wheels for 12, 18 months, and have us try to come in and help them. And so one of the culminations of a lot of that expertise, because we try to share that back. Ollie did a session this morning on Apigee Compass. And I'm trying to give you an example, right, of some of this expertise, where we've learned from customers. We've seen that they start from a inside perspective, meaning hey, I have a core banking system, or I have a payments hub, and I want to expose it from APIs. Well, I'll tell you, that almost never works. Because you're starting from the inside and you're going out. What you really should be doing is starting from the outside and coming in, right? And coming from the perspective of...
That's what startups do.
Exactly.
That's the only view they have.
Right. But that implies a massive amount of things that people are generally not ready for. And we've seen lots of customers over the years trip up on this, which is the point of the Apigee Compass, for you to, it's a litmus test to check, how are you thinking about these? What is your strategy? How are you organized? Do you think of APIs and, do you think of it as a project that I'm going to fund with some kind of a return justification to my CFO, right? And then I'm done and I move on to the next thing? Or do you see it as actually as a product effort, right? And if you see it as a product effort, that implies...
Even better solution.
Yeah, but it implies a ton of stuff, right? It's an entirely different funding model. It implies probably a product manager that's thinking about a go-to-market plan, right? None of that stuff happens in an IT project, right? It implies a partnership with IT and business that has to happen. But this is all stuff that we've seen people made mistakes on before. So it's a lot of that expertise that we try to lean into as well with our customers, right?
What was very successful in the last interview is, because I have.
Are you saying this one's not successful?
No, this I love it. But you know what? But I think what's even more magical is if we allow our audience ask those questions they want to ask, and I think that's it's very magical because, I had an unlimited amount of questions in my mind, but I think that's very magical. We did it last time, and I think I want to do it again. So
you could have warned me about this.
Yeah, but that makes it so special. Danny, I would like you first to ask a question, and then the rest.
Oh, you put some.
We have a mic. Yeah, we put a tough guy on. I know where you live, though. I'm sorry I forced you. Oh, wait. And please, I encourage you all, whoever would like to ask a question.
So we have some CIOs who would like to expose such services. Now you said it should come from the outside. You should first have your customers. What shall I say to the CIO who absolutely wants to expose his services he has internally and he thinks it's a great system?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I certainly wouldn't tell him no. He's your boss. But I think, a gentle nudge to, hey, what's our business plan? What's the go-to-market plan? Those kind of questions. Or, yeah, absolutely, let's expose it. Let's get 1 or 2 consumers to do it with us, right? Because then you can start thinking about what's the experience, what's the design of those APIs. And when I say design of APIs, already that's kind of another mind bender, right? That a lot of people won't think of, because typically, internal IT, they just have to deal with whatever freaking API is there. And no matter how cruddy or difficult it is, it's like that's what they get. But if you're taking it outside and thinking about it from a market perspective, then the design of that product, even though it's an API, becomes really important. And so even just getting 1 or 2 first consumers along for the ride is going to change the entire conversation. Yep.
I'm curious which security issues you have experienced in the past which were not so successful or painful, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I will say that one of the main reasons that the Apigee technology is purchased and used is for security, right? So there's that's one of the big purposes of API management technology is to give visibility and security to APIs, right? I'm not sure what issues you're referring to.
They're afraid that the customers get hurt and they get blamed for it.
He's got some more.
Yeah, you have usually have not only the own infrastructure, but you also depend on the third-party infrastructures, and then you have different connections and partners partnering up. And when you look at all the connections, then I think you have to control somehow the not the compliance of the security, but really the efficiency. So, is it effective? And what do you do with all the changes in your universe and in the connected
security
universes?
of your partner.
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about. Yeah. I know there's a big fear of that. In practice, at least with a lot of our other customers, I haven't seen any problems with that. And maybe it's just because we're kind of at the API level and we don't deal with things afterwards. I think I will give you one problem that we've seen, and then we've come up with a technical solution for it. In some cases, customers' mobile apps, they're all consuming APIs that are exposed on our platform, and those will get reverse engineered. And then, of course, there's a key that's out in the wild, and bad actors then use that. They come in masquerading like your mobile app, but really they're trying to crack into customer accounts. And so I led an effort, it spent about a year and a half, almost 2 years, building and releasing a product that basically looks at the behavior. We have a bunch of rules and algorithms that looks at the behavior of API traffic as it's coming in to basically discern which ones are, real customers and which ones are basically doing bad things, as one example, right? But that's one example in a list of, hey, here's possible things. And for some reason, there's a lot of security people that are here today. At least I've talked to a lot of security people. You can try to. This is kind of my push to try to get you out the door, right? Very large companies work on APIs and have been doing it for 5, 10 years. There's always going to be these kinds of things, and everybody knows how to kind of work through them and deal with them. And that's part of the value that Apigee brings, and some other vendors that are in the room or other technologies, right? But I think those are surmountable, right? They're solvable problems.
Who would like to ask a question? Wait, somebody? Perfect, thank you. I love my friends.
So he's doing your job for you.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask a slightly different type question.
It's delegating.
Slightly different type of question, actually. So you talked about the fact, it's 15 months since Google acquired you.
Yeah.
If I call it sort of small fintech bought by big fintech, how have you actually gone into Google and shook up Google and said, actually, Google, this is how you should use APIs?
Yeah, Google's already a really big user of APIs, so it's like really hard for us to come in and tell them how to do it, because you think of some really popular Google products like Maps, right? That's all delivered over APIs. They just have a massive, massive API program around that, right? And you could go down a big list. There's some page that shows you all kinds of stuff, and they're continuing to productize APIs. So one of the interesting things I saw coming in is, they've also productized image recognition and translation, right? Those are, very sophisticated, machine learning and neural network systems exposed as a very simple API product. Now, I will say that for all of Google's sophistication in running their own API products and their own API platforms, they don't know how to go out and help a Fortune 1000 company, 50, 80, 150-year-old company, how to teach them how to go to market with APIs. And that's something that Apigee is very good at, right? I don't think Google could come in and necessarily teach you that, but Apigee certainly can.
I mean, you mentioned an interesting point, and I touched on it slightly when we were having one of the roundtables earlier, which is, when Google was launching Google Maps, they never would have thought of Uber, right? And I think for me, this is where when you think about the value of the APIs and whatever else, for me, that's a fantastic use case, which is it's the APIs that's in and around Google Maps that have created a whole industry. Not just Uber, but how many apps and services and products do we all use that use that API in and around the Google Maps? That's the beauty of the APIs for me. That I think as banks, we're not looking at that opportunity. It's all existential threat we focus on as opposed to real opportunity.
Yeah, totally. And it's hard. That is actually a really hard conversation, because how do you go to your CFO and say, hey, there's all kinds of unimagined opportunities if we could only just have a set of APIs and get started, right? Please give me $20 million to get started.
I had this blue letter for you ready.
Right. And so that's the tough one, where as technology leaders or business leaders, you have to figure out, hey, what's like the first couple of use cases or projects to try to get that wheel going. And you prove some success in the company to then be able to take the next step, right? And there's lots of, even Uber itself is a super cool use case that I love. And Uber is not a customer of ours, but they open a set of APIs, and you can order an Uber from inside of airline apps. You can order an Uber from inside of a Ticketmaster app, which is basically where your concert tickets are to take you to the concert. And they open a set of APIs because it was a defensive measure. What they wanted to do was be able to get into other market niches that they knew they themselves wouldn't get into. So you can have flowers delivered by API. you can have your dry cleaning delivered by API, right? Now they've gone to market with one of those. They've got Eats. Yeah, exactly. You know, so there's one where they said, hey, yeah, we'll go to market with this, but these other use cases, you know, just let the market do that.
No, APIs is a good way of igniting innovation within an organization, because obviously you have to open it up. That's a fact. Competition is out there which will take advantage. So either you say, okay, lie down and die, or compete. And I think the right people in that organization, I think there are a lot of people that think competing is fun in a good way, you know, because I think, you know, we always forget that, you know, I look at big banks and even at Google sometimes, I think, oh, they're not innovative. But when you talk to people inside those organizations, you meet a lot of very smart people who want to change things and are as entrepreneurial as startups. And so the API will force an organization to unleash a little bit of this, because otherwise you're dead meat. You know, it's like saying, okay, they're going to do it anyway outside. Hey, boys, what we're going to do about it?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, though, because you know, I've been kind of hammering on about external and partners, and you know, we talk about fintechs and all that stuff. When I look at the Apigee customer base, you know, some of them go very external, like the Walgreens case, or you know, Magazine Louisa, or something like that. You know, but there's also a lot of companies that recognize, hey, we just have to get really fast at software. That software is, you know, again, like the, you know, huge thing. Hey, it's going to be more important, and we want our own software components to talk to other software components. And if somebody's building something interesting, we want other people inside the company, our own developers, to have easy access, right? From an external perspective, the benchmark that we kind of try to hold our customers up to is 5 minutes. If a developer or a partner can show up, you know, to developer.mybank.com, see your APIs, try one out live right there, right? And get a key and get into a sandbox in 5 minutes or less. You know, which is like unheard of, right? Sometimes in some of our customers, you know, it takes months to get access to those APIs. You know, you want to be faster at software delivery. That's a good way to do it, is to enable instant self-service access to all your APIs, right? Internally. And there's actually, does anybody know the Bezos story, the Bezos API story?
Go for it.
No? Okay, yeah, I'm getting a lot of blank stares. So there's a famous memo that was leaked, essentially. This guy, Steve Yegi, and Yegi is actually not that important. He's just the guy that did the leaking. And he used to work at Amazon. And in 2002, Jeff Bezos issued a memo. It was basically an edict inside the company that said that all teams working on different products inside of Amazon no longer could, you know, do any you know, shared databases or dynamic linking or shared files or any other way of talking to each other. If you wanted to communicate with some other software component, you had to do it over a service interface. And every team was going to expose service interfaces, APIs. And that was the only way that you could talk to some other system. And if you didn't do that, you were fired, right? And he actually meant it. He hired this Army Ranger as kind of his enforcer. The guy went around making sure that everybody did this, right? Go search it. You'll find the story, right? You can actually get access to the memo. It's still a public memo, an internal memo. But you think about what that did, right? And you can actually overlay that time point with the innovations that Google built, right? Because what is cloud? It's just an automated data center exposed as a set of APIs. And you look at the pace of innovation that Amazon has had over that time, and you can point back to that as part of the reason why. Somebody made the comment today too that, you know, well, actually even in Rishi's talk last night as well, right? Where he's saying, hey, other banks want to use my platform. That's the model, right? I have a set of APIs. I know who it was. It was Ewan from Nordea, right? Was talking about people wanting to use his mortgage platform, right? If it's API enabled and done in such a way that third parties can access it, right? That was another part of the Bezos edict, was that it has to be exposed in such a way that if tomorrow somebody asked you, hey, let an outsider, a third party, get access to it, that you could actually do it, right? But that is the model that we're talking about.
Any more questions? All right. I want to thank you very much for coming here, for enlightening us, and yes, and thank you for the great audience, and yes.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.